Ladies and gentlemen, Woody Allen.
Thank you. This is really, for me, one of my rare appearances outside of Greenwich Village in Manhattan, where I come from in New York. And I went formally, this was some years ago, to New York University, which is in Greenwich Village. And when I first started working, I was working at a place called the Bitter End, a coffee house in New York. An amusing place. And I used to see kids that I went to college with years ago who grew up and got married and now are happy, presumably. And my first week working, I saw a girl that I knew from college many years ago, an arch liberal at college, very, very arch and enormously liberal. Very black clothes and pierced ears, you know, really involved with herself. And she's married now. She's settled down and happy. She's had her ears filled in by a doctor, you know. She's practicing with her husband what they refer to as rhythmic birth control. And apparently, she has not been able to keep a beat. She's densely populated. And, you know, also, I don't originally come from the village. I come from Brooklyn originally. I come from Orthodox Jewish parents that live in Brooklyn. Or they were, I should say, Orthodox Jewish, but then they built in my neighborhood what's known as a Reformed synagogue out of chromium. They furnished it with Danish modern furniture, you know, and hanging lamps. And they made it very simple for you. You can drive in now. Pray by mail. You know. The last thing I heard was that they were going to give up worshiping altogether there, you know, and just meet once a year on the high holidays and hold a fashion show. I live now, I would say, I think in a rich neighborhood. I live across the street from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is this fabulous museum of art. And when I was younger, I used to hang out a lot at the museum in search of a meaningful social relationship of some. I used to look for girls at the museum. And I saw on the wall once a nude by Rubens, but a real succulent nude. A naked huntress stabbing to death a warthog. And I got very emotionally involved with the painting, you know, and two guards had to restrain me. Tried to lick some of the oil off the canvas. So I was thinking to myself, at that time, where is it that I could meet the kind of girl that would pose for that type picture? And in my neighborhood, there's an art supply shop that deals in offbeat things. And I run down there, and I get the name of an artist model off the wall. And I call her up. And I came on very strong like an artist. You know, I used a lot of very artistic terms like brush, I said, and easel. I was just adorable. And we agreed on a price, you know, and hung up. And I got all dressed up in my smock and beret, you know, and little Harvey's Bristol cream on the hair. You know? I'm too much what I want to be. And I waited there. An hour later, there's a knock on my door, and standing there is this fabulous woman, but really sensational. And I let her in quickly, you know, and I locked the door with my police lock immediately. And I said to her, take off your clothes right away, because I don't know much about art, but I know what I like. She took off everything, very professional, and posed. And I began to shake. You know, that's my thing, I shake all the time. I'm not good in those kind of situations, you know. I'm perspiring audibly, you know. She's standing there in front of me, majestic. I took my piece of paper and my charcoal pencil, and I went up to her, and I got into a little trouble with her because I tried to trace her. I have a love story where I come out good. I'm always telling love stories on television and never winning. A long time ago, let me start this at the beginning because it's très romantic. I was at City Center in New York. I was watching a ballet. And I'm not a ballet fan at all, but they were doing The Dying Swan, And there was a rumor that some bookmakers had drifted into town from upstate New York, you know, and that they had fixed the ballet. Apparently there was a lot of money bet on the Swan to live. And I'm there in my great Italian suit. I had on a thin, tight, suffocating suit, you know, with a lot of buttons up the front like this, you know. Both my legs go into one pant on it down the side, you know. I'm just aces. And I see a girl in the box. And my weak spot is women. You should know this about me. I always think someday they're going to make me a birthday party and wheel out a tremendous birthday cake, and a giant naked woman is going to leap out of the cake and hurt me and leap back in. Go up to this girl, and I talked to her, and I was very good with her. She was a brilliant girl. She was a Bennington College girl. She was studying at Bennington to be a woman-male nurse in a 4-year program. And she was living with, when I was dating her, a painter, a post-impressionist, mock, pseudo-psychotic, neo-quasi-cretin painter who had, in a burst of artistic integrity, when I tried to cut off his ear in her apartment. You know? Unfortunately, he had tried it with an electric razor. When you have to do this for a half an hour. Depressing. She was a swinger. She had a little brother when she was younger, 8 years old, and her parents sent the kid to military school. And while he was there, he stole something. Jam. And they wanted to do things right. They caught him. It was military school. So they held a court-martial there. And they found the kid guilty. And they shot him. They returned to his parents half the tuition fee, you know. All the name tapes went back and everything. And the rubber sheet, you know, and all that. Meanwhile, I was running amok with his sister. His sister was a destructive, primitive blonde. A killer. We used to go up to her apartment late at night, and all her beatnik friends would be sitting cross-legged on each other there. They'd be trying to make opium out of poppies given out by veterans on streetcars. We used to plug in her $12.50 hi-fi set with a teakwood needle, you know. Put on the record albums of Marcel Marceau, and she killed me. Every time I tell this story, I'm embarrassed because I was what you would call, I think, intellectually unworthy of her. I was thrown out of college. I think I mentioned that before once on television. I cheated. I was the worst algebra student in college, and on the final test, I sat next to Alvin Beckman, who was this very bright kid. I got a mirror. I hid it in the palm of my hand. I got all the answers off Beckman's paper in my mirror. I got them all backwards. He got 94, I got 49. They threw me out immediately. And when I was thrown out of college, it's a curious thing. That was, at that time, I went in, for the first time in my life, I think, to my psychoanalysis, which I always discuss publicly. I was in group analysis. For those of you who don't know group psychoanalysis, it's a group of neurotics that meet a couple of times a week and sit around in a room and twitch or something, you know. An analyst presides over you, and like you raise your hand and say, I feel short and unloved. And the doctor says, Mr. Allen here feels short and unloved. How many feel he is? Hands? They all raise their hand, you know. And it's unanimous. I'm short and unloved, you know. It cost me $20 to have that reaffirmed each week by the group. And I went. I was very good. And nothing happened. Nobody was cured. This was years ago. Last year, the group broke up. I get in the mail an engraved invitation. Class reunion. The old group analysis group. All the neurotics came back, all the nail-biters and bedwetters, you know, it was a catered affair. Fabulous thing. And in the interim, 2 of the kids in the group had gotten married, and this is adorable, because it's what you'd call a mixed marriage or an intermarriage, in that the girl was paranoid, and the boy was schizophrenic. And there was a big conflict about which way they would bring up the children. Anyhow, the girl finally broke up with me. She was too brilliant for me, and I was not equal to it. She had won a scholarship to secretarial school, and the government sent her to Switzerland to study typing, you know. That was it. I'm self-educated myself. I taught myself to type by memorizing the keys of the typewriter. First line is QWERTY UEOP. Second line is Astaficatical. The third is Zux But they rarely come up in letter writing.